A fork hit the floor and skidded under a table. A woman's hand had knocked it there, a hand that would not stop shaking. She reached for it, missed, and her arm shook harder. A younger woman dropped to her knees, picked it up, and wiped it clean on her apron. She never stopped smiling. The old woman's eyes filled with quiet tears. Behind them, a man in a leather vest watched from a booth by the window. He had scars on his knuckles and gray in his beard. He had walked into meaner rooms than this one and walked out first. But that shaking hand held him where he sat. His name was Cash Delaney, and men across 3 states knew that name and feared it. What that road captain did before the sun went down would leave an entire diner in tears. Stay with me on this one. The diner sat off Interstate 10 just past the Tucson city line. It was the kind of place you stop at only because your tank is low or your back hurts. Cracked vinyl booths, a ceiling fan that turned too slow to move any air. Cash Delaney had ridden 200 miles of desert that morning, and his knees had counted every one of them. He'd only come in for coffee. That was the whole plan. Coffee, maybe a slice of pie if it looked honest, then back on the road to meet the rest of his chapter outside Phoenix by dark. He wasn't a man who lingered. 58 years old, road captain for going on 20 of them, and he'd learned a long time ago that lingering was how trouble found you. Then he saw the girl with the fork. She couldn't have been more than 25. Dark hair pulled back tight, an order pad in her apron pocket, sneakers worn down flat at the heel. And there in the corner booth sat an older woman, her mother. Anybody could see that, with the same eyes and 40 hard years between them. The mother's hands trembled without stopping. Not a little shake. A deep one, the kind that comes from something inside the body breaking down and never fixing itself. Cash knew that shake. He knew it the way you know a song you haven't heard in years but never really forgot. He watched the girl move between tables, 2 truckers, a family with a screaming toddler, an old man reading the paper. She took every order, poured every refill, and in between she came back to that corner booth. She'd cut the food into small pieces. She'd load a spoon, and she'd feed her mother one careful bite at a time, wiping her chin with a napkin, talking soft the whole while. Not once did she look embarrassed. Not once did she glance around to see who was watching. She just smiled at her mother like the woman was the most important customer in the place. Cash felt something turn over in his chest. He hadn't felt it in a long while, and he didn't much like feeling it now. His dog felt it too. Diesel lay under the table at Cash's boots, a big German shepherd, gone gray at the muzzle, one ear torn half off and a long scar down his flank from a war neither of them talked about. Diesel had ridden more miles than most men ever drive. He lifted his head. His nose worked the air. And his eyes went straight to that corner booth. "Easy," Cash murmured. The dog stayed put, for now. That's when the owner came out from the back. You could tell what he was before he said a word. Big belly, thin patience, a manager's shirt with a name tag that read VIC. He had a green ticket in his hand and he was waving it like a weapon. "Marisol," he said it loud so the whole room could hear, "you want to explain this to me." The girl straightened up. "Vic, not now, please, my mom's." "Now, yeah, now." He slapped the ticket down on the counter. $62, that's how much you and her have run up. Coffee, eggs, soup, every shift you feed her out of my kitchen and you don't wring a dime of it. You think I'm running a charity here. I'm good for it. Payday's Friday, I always. You always say Friday, and Friday comes and there's rent and there's her medicine and it's always something. He leaned in close. "One more time, one more tab, and you're done here, both of you, out." The whole diner had gone quiet. The truckers stared into their coffee. The old man lowered his paper. And Marisol, she didn't argue anymore. She just nodded, took the ticket, folded it small, and slid it into her apron pocket like she was tucking away a wound so nobody would see it bleed. Then she turned back to her mother, picked up the spoon, and kept feeding her. Her hand was steady. Only her jaw gave her away, tight as a fist. Cash sat there in his booth by the window and watched the whole thing. He didn't move. He didn't say a word. But something behind his eyes had gone very cold and very calm, and if you knew the man, you'd know that was the most dangerous thing about him. Cash Delaney didn't get loud when it mattered. He got quiet. He looked down at the folded ticket in that girl's pocket. $62. $62, and a man was willing to throw a caregiver and a sick woman out onto a highway over it. Cash had money in his pocket. He could have walked up and paid it right there. And a lesser story would have ended just like that, a good deed, a nice tip, a warm feeling on the road home. But Cash didn't reach for his wallet. Not yet. Because Cash had learned something over 58 years that most people never learn at all. Kindness that fixes one bad day isn't kindness. It's a bandage. And this girl didn't need a bandage, so he did something else instead. He reached into his vest, pulled out an old flip phone, and he started to dial. Diesel got up. The dog crossed the floor slow, nails clicking on the tile, and nobody stopped him because nobody quite knew what to do about a 100-pound shepherd with a scarred face walking through a diner. He went straight to the corner booth, straight to the shaking woman, and he laid his big gray head down gently in her lap. The old woman went still. Her trembling hands settled onto his fur, and for the first time since Cash had walked in, those hands stopped shaking. Marisol's mouth fell open. She looked at the dog. She looked around for whoever he belonged to. And her eyes found Cash, the big man in the leather vest, phone pressed to his ear, watching her with an expression she couldn't read at all. "Sir," she said, "I'm so sorry. Diesel, is that his name? I'll move him, he won't bother." Cash raised one hand. "Just stay," that's what the hand said. Into the phone he spoke low. "Yeah, it's me, you near the clubhouse. Good, get the boys, I need everybody who can ride. No, nobody's hurt. Just get to a diner off the 10 south of town. The old one, the yellow sign, bring your wallets." A pause. "And bring the checkbook, the club one. Yeah, I'll explain when you're here." He closed the phone. Marisol was still watching him, half scared, half something else. Her mother had both hands buried in Diesel's fur now, and she was smiling. A lopsided, watery smile, but a real one. "Your dog," Marisol said quietly. "He knew." "He always knows," Cash said. It was the first full sentence he'd said out loud since he sat down. He got up. He was bigger standing than he'd looked in the booth, military big, thick through the shoulders, a man built to close doorways. He walked over, and Vic, the owner, tensed up behind his counter because a biker crossing the room is never a comfortable sight. But Cash didn't go to Vic. He went to the corner booth. He crouched down beside Diesel, put his scarred hand next to the old woman's trembling one, and he looked her right in the eyes. "Ma'am," he said, "what's your name?" "Elena," Marisol answered for her because the words didn't come easy for her mother anymore. "Elena Reyes." "Elena," Cash nodded slow. "My mother had what you've got, same shake, right down to the hands." He didn't say anything else about it. He didn't need to, but Marisol saw his throat move. Then he stood and he turned to the girl and he asked the question that started everything. "How much do you actually owe? Not the tab, all of it, the rent, the medicine, the whole hole you're standing in. Don't lie to me because I've been lied to by better than you and I always know." Marisol's eyes filled up. Nobody had ever asked her that, not like that. Not like the answer mattered. She opened her mouth, and that's when Vic stepped in and ruined it. Hey, she's on the clock." He came around the counter, chest out, thumbs hooked in his belt. "I don't know what you think this is, but I got a business to run. She wants to sit around sharing her sob story. She can do it on her own time, which is looking like it starts real soon." Cash turned his head, just his head. And he looked at Vic the way a man looks at a dog he's decided not to kick yet. You own this place. 12 years. 12 years, Cash nodded. And in 12 years, the best thing that ever walked through your door is standing right there feeding her sick mother while you count pennies. He let that sit. You should think hard about how the rest of today goes for you, Vic. Vic opened his mouth. Then he heard it. Everybody heard it. It started low, way off down the highway, a rumble you felt in the floor before your ears caught up. Then it grew, louder, closer. That deep, rolling thunder of 24 engines, all of them coming down the 10 together. Vic went to the window. His face changed color. Motorcycles. A long line of them, chrome flashing in the afternoon sun, filling the parking lot one after another until there was no more lot to fill. Leather vests, gray beards and young ones, big men and lean ones. The Hells Angels of the local charter, every rider Cash could raise on one phone call, and they kept coming, engines shaking the windows in their frames. Marisol grabbed the edge of the booth. Her mother's eyes went wide. Even Diesel lifted his head, and Cash Delaney finally smiled. "Sit down, Alina," he said gently. "You're gonna want to be sitting for this part." The door opened, and the first of them walked in, and the whole diner held its breath. "Now, if you've made it this far with me and your chest is doing that thing mine did the first time I heard this story, do me one small favor. Hit that subscribe button. Because what these men did next is the reason I tell this story at all, and you're not going to want to miss a second of it. Go ahead. I'll wait right here." The bell over the door didn't stop ringing. They came in 2 and 3 at a time, filling the little diner with leather and boots and the smell of the road, until there wasn't a booth left empty and men stood along the walls with their arms crossed. 26 of them all told. And every single one of them, once they were inside, went quiet and looked to Cash. Vic had backed up against his own counter. His mouth worked, but nothing came out. The first rider through the door was a broad man about Cash's age, silver braid down his back, a patch that read Sergeant A.T. Arms. Folks called him Tank. He crossed to Cash, and the two men clasped hands the way brothers do. "Talk to me," Tank said low. "You said bring the checkbook, somebody sick, somebody owe somebody." Cash turned him by the shoulder and pointed, not at Vic, at the corner booth, at Marisol, who stood frozen with a coffee pot in her hand, and at Alina, whose trembling fingers were still buried in Diesel's fur. "That girl," Cash said, quiet enough that only the brothers near him could hear, "feeds her mother by hand between tables. Woman's got Parkinson's. Bad. Can't hold a fork." He paused. "And the man who owns this place just threatened to throw them both out on the highway over a $62 tab for feeding her own mother soup." You could see it move through them. One man told the next, and the next told the one behind him in low voices, and you watched 24 hard faces turn one after another toward that corner booth. These were not gentle men. Most of them had done time. Some of them you would cross the street to avoid on a dark night, and you'd be right too. But every one of them had a mother. Tank was the first to move. He reached into his vest, pulled out a fold of bills, peeled off 520s, and set them on the counter in front of Vic without a word. Then the man behind him did the same. Then the next. It became a line. A slow, silent line of the meanest-looking men in Arizona, each one stepping up to the counter, each one laying down money, 20s, 50s, 100s, whatever was in the pocket. They didn't say anything to Vic. They didn't need to. They just looked at him while they did it, and the pile grew, and Vic's face got whiter and whiter. Marisol set the coffee pot down before she dropped it. "Stop," she said. Her voice cracked. "Please, you don't have to. This isn't, I don't even know you." Cash walked over to her. He put one big scarred hand on her shoulder, gentle as anything. "You don't have to know us," he said. That's the whole point, sweetheart. You didn't ask. That's exactly why. But he wasn't done. Because Cash Delaney hadn't called 24 men off the highway to cover a diner tab. A tab was a bandage. Cash had come to do surgery. "Tank," he said, "get Doc on the phone, and the lawyer, the club one, Ramirez. Tell them both to come now, not later." Then he pulled out a chair, spun it around backward, and sat down across from Marisol at the corner booth. Diesel stayed right where he was, head in Alina's lap, and Alina's shaking had eased to almost nothing with the weight and warmth of him there. "Now," Cash said, "I asked you a question before and that fat man interrupted us. So I'm asking again, and I want the truth. How deep is the hole, all of it?" And this time, Marisol told him. It came out in pieces, the way these things do when someone finally lets you carry them. Her father had left when she was 9. She'd raised her younger brothers. 2 years back, her mother's hands had started to shake, and the diagnosis had come like a door slamming, Parkinson's, early and mean. The medicine cost more than the rent. There was no insurance worth the name. Marisol had dropped out of nursing school to work doubles because somebody had to and there wasn't anybody else. She brought her mother to the diner on the days she couldn't afford anyone to sit with her, and she fed her between tables, and she'd been doing it for 8 months, and she was so tired that some mornings she cried in the walk-in cooler where nobody could hear. "I'm 3 months behind on rent," she said finally, wiping her face hard with the back of her wrist. "Landlord's already talking eviction, and her next scan, the neurologist wants a scan and a new prescription, and I can't. I keep doing the math, and the math doesn't work no matter how I do it." The whole diner had gone silent listening, big men with wet eyes pretending they weren't. Cash nodded slowly through all of it. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer some cheap comfort. He just listened, the way most people never get listened to their whole lives. When she finished, he was quiet a moment. Then he reached into his vest and took out a photograph, soft and worn, white at the folds from being carried a long time. He set it on the table and turned it toward her. It was a woman in a wheelchair. Gray hair, kind face, hands folded in her lap, hands you could tell, even in a picture, didn't hold still. And behind the wheelchair, a younger Cash, no gray in his beard yet, bent down with his cheek against hers, both of them mid-laugh. "My mother," he said, "Rosa, same disease. I fed her by hand the last 4 years of her life. Cut everything small, spoon at a time." Wiped her chin. He touched the photo with one scarred finger. "The club used to give me grief about it. Big bad road captain driving 3 hours every Sunday to feed his mama soup." He almost smiled. "They stopped giving me grief real quick. Every one of them started coming with me. That dog there, Diesel, he was hers. He'd lay his head in her lap just like he's doing with yours right now. Some things a dog just knows." Marisol was crying openly now, and she wasn't the only one. "When she passed," Cash went on, "I promised her something. I promised I'd never ride past another one. Another daughter feeding her mother by hand and drowning while she did it. I promised I'd stop. Every time." He looked up at her. "You're the one I stopped for today." That was when the door opened again. 2 more people came in, a lean older man with a black bag, the club's doctor, and a sharp-eyed woman in a blazer carrying a briefcase, the lawyer, Ramirez. Cash had thought of everything. He stood up. He turned around. And now, finally, he looked at Vic. "Here's how the rest of today goes," Cash said, and his voice was still quiet. That's what made the whole room lean in. He walked to the counter, where the pile of cash had grown into something you don't often see in one place. Ramirez, the lawyer, was already counting it into neat stacks with quick fingers. 4,200, she said, "and change." Cash nodded. He pushed the entire pile across the counter toward Vic. 62 of that covers her tab. We'll call it paid in full. The rest," he stopped. "No. The rest doesn't go to you." He scooped the money back off the counter, all but the $62, which he left sitting there, and he pressed the thick fold into Marisol's hands and closed her fingers around it. "That's the rent," he said. "All 3 months and next month too. That's this month's medicine, that's the scan." Marisol shook her head, tried to push it back. "I can't. This is no, I can't take this, it's too." "You can and you will." Cash held her hands closed around the money. "Because here's what you don't understand yet, and I need you to hear me. Every man in this room has slept in a ditch, has been hungry, has been the guy nobody stopped for, and every one of them knows what it's worth when somebody does stop." He nodded at the room. "This isn't charity, Marisol. This is the club paying back a debt we owe to everybody who ever should have stopped for us and didn't. You're just the one standing here to collect it. Take it." She took it. She pressed it to her chest and bent over it and just wept, and Diesel got up and leaned his whole weight against her legs so she wouldn't be standing alone while she did. But Cash still wasn't finished, because Cash Delaney does nothing halfway. He turned to the doctor. "Doc, you take a look at Alina. Whatever she needs, the good neurologist, not the free clinic one, the good one, the club covers it. Set it up." Doc nodded and crouched by the corner booth, already talking gently to Alina, taking her trembling hand in both of his. Then Cash turned to Ramirez, the lawyer. And he said the thing that changed Marisol's whole life. "Set up a fund, club charity, all legal, monthly. Her mother's care, her rent, and," he glanced at Marisol, "she's going back to nursing school. Full ride out of the fund. She had a year left when she quit. She's going to finish it." He looked at the girl. "You're going to be the nurse who takes care of the next Alina. That's the deal. That's how you pay it back. You don't pay us. You pay it forward for the rest of your life. Understood?" Marisol couldn't even speak. She just nodded, and Cash put his big arm around her and let her cry into his vest. This hardened man who men across 3 states feared, holding a waitress like she was his own daughter. And Vic. Vic still stood at his counter, forgotten, $62 in front of him and 26 Hell's Angels between him and any word he might have said. Cash finally looked at him one more time. He picked up the green ticket, the tab, the folded wound Marisol had tucked into her apron, and he tore it clean in half and let the pieces flutter down onto the counter. "She doesn't work for you anymore," Cash said. "As of right now. And Vic, the next time somebody comes into your place and they're drowning and it costs you $62 to be a decent human being," he leaned in, "you be a decent human being. Because you never know who's sitting in the booth by the window watching." Then he turned his back on the man like he was already nothing, and he crouched down one more time by Alina Reyes, and he took her shaking hand in his, steady and warm. "You're gonna be all right now, Alina," he said. "You hear me? You're gonna be all right." And the old woman, who could barely make words come anymore, looked at this scarred stranger holding her hand, and she managed just to. "Thank you," she whispered. The whole diner lost it. Big men wiped their faces with the backs of their hands and pretended it was the dust off the highway. Even Tank, the sergeant-at-arms, turned toward the window and blinked hard at the parking lot. The sun was going down over the desert by the time they left, gold light stretching long across the 10. They didn't leave empty. Doc had a follow-up scheduled for Alina with the best neurologist in Tucson, that same week, paid. Ramirez had Marisol's information and a folder started, and by the following Monday the fund was real, filed, funded, and quietly feeding money toward a rent check, a pharmacy, and a nursing school registrar's office. Cash had made sure of every piece before a single one of those bikes started its engine again. Marisol walked them out, all 26. She hugged every one of them, these men she'd been raised to be afraid of, and not one of them let her thank him too much, because that's not how the club does it. "Pay it forward," they kept saying. "Pay it forward," over and over down the line. Cash was the last to go. He crouched in the parking lot and said goodbye to Alina through the open door where she sat, Diesel still beside her, unwilling to leave her lap. And here's the part that gets me every time. Cash looked at that old dog, his mother's dog, the scarred shepherd who'd ridden 10,000 miles of highway with him since Rosa passed, and Cash made a decision right there in the parking lot with the sun going down. "He stays," Cash said. Marisol shook her head. "What? No, he's yours. He's been yours for years. I couldn't." "He picked her." Cash's voice was rough now, and he didn't try to hide it. "First minute we walked in, he walked across a whole room full of people and he put his head in her lap. He hasn't done that since my mother died." He swallowed. "He knows what she needs. He was hers before either of us walked in that door. He just took his time finding her. Let him stay. He'll keep her hands still on the bad days. He knows how." He knelt down in front of the old dog, took that torn-eared gray head in both his scarred hands and pressed his forehead against the shepherd's for a long moment. Nobody heard what he said. It was between the two of them, an old soldier and his old dog, saying goodbye after 10,000 miles. Then Cash stood up, and he didn't look back because a man like Cash can only hold so much at once. He swung a leg over his bike. The engine caught. And the whole charter rolled out of that parking lot together in a river of chrome and thunder, back onto the 10, gone into the setting sun. Marisol stood in the empty lot with her mother's hand in one of hers and a fold of money against her chest and a great gray dog leaning warm against her leg, and she watched them go until the sound faded all the way down to nothing. 2 years later, she graduated, registered nurse. She works the neurology floor at a hospital in Tucson now, the ward for movement disorders, Parkinson's mostly. She's the one they call when a patient's hands won't stop shaking and they're scared and ashamed. She sits with them. She feeds them when they can't feed themselves, one careful spoonful at a time, and she never once lets them see anything but a smile. Her mother, Alina, is still with her. The good neurologist got her on the right medicine early, and the shaking, while it never left, never won either. Diesel lived out the rest of his long life curled at her feet, and on the bad days, right to the end, he'd rest his gray head in her lap and hold her hand still, just like Cash said he would. When he finally passed, the whole family cried like they'd lost a person because they had. And every year, on the anniversary of that afternoon, a plain envelope arrives at Marisol's door with no return address. Inside is a card and a photograph of a woman in a wheelchair named Rosa, and always the same 2 words written in a rough hand. "Pay it forward." Marisol keeps them all in a drawer by her bed. She's never once been able to thank the man properly, and she stopped trying because she finally understands that he never wanted the thanks. He wanted the promise kept. A daughter feeding her mother, drowning while she did it, and somebody stopped. Every time. Just like he swore to a dying woman he would. So the next time you're driving some empty stretch of highway and you pass a rundown diner with a line of motorcycles out front, remember this. You have no idea what those men are doing in there. You have no idea who stopped for a stranger today and asked for nothing, and rode off into the sun before anyone could learn his name. A fork hit the floor. A daughter picked it up and never stopped smiling. And a hard man by the window saw it and kept a promise and changed everything before the sun went down. That's the whole story. And if it puts something in your throat the way it did in mine, feeding the people we love and stopping for the ones we don't even know, then say so. Leave a word below. Tell me about the person who stopped for you. I read every one of them. Drive safe out there. And when you can stop for somebody, stop.